My name's Rich, welcome back to Me, My Bike and I, and today we've got rid of the lockdown hair. But seriously, we've also got rid of a shed load of stuff off the workbench. Well, the south side workbench, as I've literally just named it. Facing north, we have got an absolute pile of bits. So as you can see, I've got all of the engine on the bench except the crankcases, which are actually on the floor, and quite a lot of it I've got in plastic bags, and I've done that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose anything, and you've got things like cam chain tensioners and piston heads and all their little springs and circlips and things like that that you just need to keep together. And secondly, it gives me an opportunity to label everything so I know which cylinder block, front or rear, that it all came off. So what we're going to start to do is go through all of the parts and just see what condition they're in, and also look for some signs of damage, because I did find aluminium as well as steel floating around inside the crankcase when I opened it up. The aluminium, of course, was on the crankshaft journal on the very end underneath the bearing, that plain shell bearing, but I found some shards of steel as well floating around in the crankcases, and at the moment I've got no idea where any of that came from. So as we inspect these parts, I'm hoping to see some scrapings and some wear, some bits broken off, things like that, so that we can see at least what is damaged. And of course we do need to make sure absolutely everything is thoroughly cleaned, particularly the oil galleries where we know that aluminium got down into to get onto that crankshaft bearing. So we need to make sure we clean and blow those out properly before we put anything back together. So what we're going to do is start to pull all this stuff out, have a look at it, see what we need to do, and get on with the rebuild. But before we get into any of the cleaning and inspection, we need to do some fixing, because I certainly don't want to be cleaning anything up whilst I'm still working on parts such as drilling and things like that. Now this is the rear cylinder head. I know this for two reasons. Firstly, I wrote R on it for rear, but the obvious giveaway is it's got this manifold on it. It doesn't have that on the front one. The exhaust goes directly into the cylinder head. On the rear one, you've got this little manifold and the exhaust goes into that. Now when I tried to get the exhaust off, I sheared both of the nuts off. You'd have to go back about 3 videos, I think, on the engine removal video to see me dealing with this particular issue. So the way I intend to try and get these out is to just get some heat on this manifold here, and perhaps cut some flats in or a slot or something like that so I can get hold of it and back them out that way. Failing that, I should just have to drill them out and perhaps either re-thread them or just put a threaded bolt straight through a plain hole and put a nut on the back. Either way, that should be a fairly simple fix, but it needs doing before I do any cleaning and reassembling. I'm also going to take the head apart, get the cams out, inspect them, all that kind of stuff, and that'll give me an opportunity to clean up the surfaces of the valves and the combustion chamber and lap everything back in, because with these engines, of course, they are actually nice and easy to adjust. You haven't got any expensive shims or anything like that, so lapping them back in is a bit of a dreamy job, because then you can just readjust the clearances and what have you on the tappet, so nice and easy. The other thing I need to do is just back out these 2 studs where the manifold goes into the head. This one is absolutely fine. This one is rounded. It does move because I put a wrench on it earlier. You can't get a 12mm spanner on it and turn it, but you can get an adjustable wrench on there, you know, like a mole wrench, and turn it that way. So it'll come out, and I'm going to need to either get those nuts off the studs and replace those, or just replace the whole stud as well. So that's the repair of the rear cylinder head that I shall need to get on and do. And then I have only got, as far as I can see, 2 other little repairs to do on the crankcases, which is really the same repair twice. I shall show you what I mean. We're looking at this part here. It's got a bolt that goes all the way through, and it isn't a case bolt as such, it's just a hanger bolt. So it's not something that would be torqued up at all. I don't even think there's a torque spec for it. It's just a bolt head on one end and a nut on the other end, and it holds the brackets for the foot peg and brake lever and gear changer pedals, etc. So it's just a hanger bracket, and it's corroded in there on both sides. It will not budge. So there's absolutely no way I could have separated those cases with that bolt still through there. And I took an angle grinder and sliced it through. And just to give you a little close up here, you can clearly see where I went through it with the angle grinder. But of course I've got to get this stuck, two halves of the stuck bolt out, because when I put the bike back together, I've got to be able to rehang the bracket on this mount with a new bolt. So let's just separate these two halves again. So if you have a little look at where I sliced through it, it's a 10mm cross-section bolt, sat inside a 12mm hole, and I think now, on closer inspection, it's not just corrosion. Somebody's gone and chucked a load of JB Weld or something like that in there. That's what it looks like anyway. And you should be able to see the cut line just there where the angle grinder came up to. But I'm going to try and put some heat on this and see if we can drive it out using the bench vise. Just going to use this 2.5cm collar, 12mm ID, and that'll go on that side, and it'll give me something to drive the bolt into as I close the vise in around it. And I'm going to try and push it through using this 6mm socket, and if it doesn't all just collapse on me, we might get a result. Let's give it another little go. We'll see. I can hear creaking and cracking. It's really disconcerting. I'm going to take it out. I'm not happy with this. What's the worst that can happen? The G-clamp could bend, I suppose. Seems to be what's happening at the moment. I could hear some really disconcerting cracking noises, but I think that was just where My tactics are paying off. Okay, might just have right, well I can't do this up anymore because I've knackered it. So let's see if we can just get this one off and Right, well, this G-clamp has had its day. It's useless really. You can see the bar there is going off at a complete angle, so I can't get down and drive that bolt anymore. And I've broken one of the wings off. It's warped because of all the heat and pressure. So this, I'm afraid, I'm going to have to consign to the scrap bin. I do have another one, but I'm not going to use it just yet. I'm going to switch tacks on this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a block of metal underneath with my same collar that I was using to support it. And I'm going to use a bolt down the hole and I'm going to give it a whack with a hammer. Just using the pliers just to steady it. Right, here we go. Right, much longer bolt this time. God, that moved about 3mm in the space of, what, 5 whacks? It's nearly out. In fact, I can no longer use this collar because it's gone the full length of travel in it. And if I support it underneath, I'm just going to be hitting the hammer. It's not going to go anywhere, so I might have to just try and freehand this one, but hopefully there's not too much resistance, so let's see what happens. That happens. Well, this was the right hand side crankcase, and I just need to get to work on the stuck part of the bolt in the left hand side. Well, got the job done, but in the process I've completely destroyed my G-clamps, so they are going to have to go in the bin, unfortunately. These are completely beyond use now, they're so warped. I've broken the wing off that one there, knocked the ends off, they won't go back on because they're split. And this is the bolt that I slit through. I'll just need to replace that. Well, I was a little bit concerned about the cases warping as I heated that area to quite some degree, and it did get a little warm around here, but nothing that seems to have caused any problems. So she's gone back together absolutely fine. I just need to get a new bolt for here. Got to clear about 7 centimetres plus enough threads for the nuts on the end and what have you, and I'm certainly not going to go bunging that back in with any JB Weld. Okay, next job, I'm going to tackle this manifold. 2 sheared off bolts in there where the exhaust goes in, for the rear exhaust obviously, and I'm going to take the manifold off of the head to do it. This one's pretty rounded, so I couldn't get a regular spanner on there unfortunately. Well, sometimes the simplest looking jobs can be the most problematic, and I do hope this doesn't turn out to be one of those. I've just got these 2 little sheared off bolts in there. They're sheared off when I tried to undo the rear exhaust, so they're clearly seized in there. Again, more seized bolts to remove. So I'm just going to chuck some heat at it and see if I can get them off with mole grips. If I can't, worst case scenario, I shall just chop them off flush, drill them out and re-tap them. Well, that kind of said it all, didn't it? That just twisted straight off, so I'm not going to have any joy getting those out. I think I'm just going to cut them off flush, drill them through and re-tap them. Right, I've gone completely ski width because you can see I need to be more over this side, and what I'm going to do is grind that back down and start again in the middle because I can't re-centre it now. So I'm just going to skim the surface off of that with a grinder. Right, bit of grinding later. Just taking that surface back down again so I can centre punch the middle and actually put the hole in the right place this time. Right. Start lining it up. I think we're okay there. Really difficult to see, the light is terrible. Looks like it's kind of in the centre there. Yeah, that reflection looks like I've drilled all the way through a tiny little hole, but that's just a reflection of my LED. I've gone a bit wonky with this. Can you see? I've just gone completely off centre with the hole there, and I started off in the middle, but the drill just kind of skirts off, and it's just such poor light, and you can't see what you're doing, and it's covered in oil and swarf and all that kind of stuff, and it's just gone completely wrong. And that side is no better, it's actually gone wrong as well, and I've blunted my drills and I can't go any further. I'm kind of thinking, what are my options now to fix this? I can either weld those holes back up and then try and find the centre again and drill them, but I'd probably need to get a tungsten carbide drill bit. I just have regular HSS ones, which are just for relatively soft metals. This would have got so hot over time, I suspect it's just hardened off, which is part of the problem really. I've just kind of skated off centre and blunted my drills. so I think if I do weld the holes up this end and find the centre, maybe I'll have to offer up the exhaust and try and orientate it properly, mark them, drill them with a tungsten carbide drill bit. That might fix it. Alternatively, I could just see if I can knock the rest of those old bits of bolt out and weld a captive nut on the right side and in exactly the right place, so that I reckon that will fix the problem. So I think I'm going to do that actually firstly, and then if I really mess it up I can just kind of grind it all off and try again, or I can just source another one on eBay. Yeah, that's not working at all. I think I'm so far off centre on that one, that's still gripping that bolt way too much and it just won't release it, and I can't get enough force on it. So I think I'm just going to have to weld them up, flat them off, find the centre, and then drill them through with a carbide drill. Well, it is looking pretty poor. I think I've slung enough molten metal at it to grind back and look respectable, and I'm just going to have a go at the other side now. That was the difficult side because the hole went all the way through. This side should be a little easier because it's only partially through and I could just hopefully fill it. Right, just cleaned up the bench. This is still really hot, so I'm going to let that cool right down before I start grinding that back. I think I've got it. Oh, Jesus. Oh, I've opened the garage door just to let the smoke clear. So where I'm up to then, you can see I've completely flatted these off with the grinder, both sides, looking all right, and I've marked them up. What I've done is the flange on the exhaust actually rotates around the exhaust. It's separate, which is quite convenient, so I can't really go wrong in terms of the orientation of where I drill them, as long as they match up to the holes on the flange on the exhaust. So that's where my dots are. And what we're going to do next is use these little puppies to re-drill the holes. I decided to get split point cobalt drills instead of tungsten carbide because carbide are a bit too brittle, and these are good enough to go through stainless steel or cast iron, any hardened steel really, and they're split points, they shouldn't wander. And I bought them in 1/2 mil steps so that I can drill for example a 5.5 mil hole and then tap it out to 6 mil. So that should do the job. I'm going to give it a go, see what happens. .2 mil pilot hole, so I drilled in from this side, measured it all up, came out dead centre, dead nuts. So these are drilled out now to about 5 mil. I'm going to tap them out to 6 mil with a 1 mil pitch, as I've found a couple of bolts that will do the job in my collection of odds and sods. I think I actually pulled these off the XV535 some time back, of probably a part that I've long since discarded. So it's always worth keeping these things. I will chase the threads on these. So I'm hoping that'll tap out okay, and then I can get it mounted up to the exhaust just to test it all. Should be fine. That's that little repair done. Not quite how you're meant to hold a tap wrench, is it? But into the cast iron now, so that's quite an easy thing to seem to go quite easy. Just need to blow that out with an airline. Going on quite easy, they're not graunchy or anything like that. Well, that was a bit graunchy actually, to be fair. But if it's the right one for the job, then God, that is really stiff. I feel like I'm cutting it a new thread. That is a good fit. Time to see if this all marries up okay. Make sure we've got everything lined up. Swap that over to there. Going in nicely. One of these threads is slightly looser than the other. I think that's because one of the holes was cut slightly smaller than the other. Just need to get a little spanner on that one's a bit tight. Can I get the ratchet in there? Yep, I can. And of course the fixings I took off, or broke off I should say, were cap head bolts, so just couldn't get my tools in there and they were stuck, so obviously this will have to come apart for reassembly, and put my gasket in, what have you, a little copper ring. That's perfect. The beauty of this is I didn't really need to thread that. It was easier than just enlarging the hole. And I could always put a nut on the back just for extra grip, but I think we shall call that job done. Well, that's got that little job out of the way. I've got one more thing to do on the engine block itself before I start the full clean and reassemble. So I'm going to pull the cases up on the bench and I will show you what the next little fix is. Yet again, it's a stuck bolt. Right. Now, one of my viewers asked me, how do you get this actuator rod out of the crankcase? And unfortunately, sadly, it's a little bit more work than you'd hope for. So the way to do it is you take the stator side cover off. This is the front of the engine. You spin the engine around. You take the clutch cover off. You take the clutch pressure plate off from this area here. And then there's a little ball bearing and a rod that you need to pull out. You typically would need a little poker with a magnet to pull those out. You can tip the engine and let them fall out, but it's easier if you've got a magnet. What that then does is gets out of the way of the cam that's holding this in. But there is one more thing holding it in. It's that little bolt down there. And unfortunately, this one's rounded. So I could just leave it. It's not doing any harm. But if anyone in future does need to get this torsion spring off or this actuator out for any reason, then they're going to have a hell of a job doing it with that rounded bolt head there. So if they go cutting it, you're going to end up with all kinds of swarf and nonsense inside the engine. And whilst I've got it apart and I'm going to clean it anyway, I might as well do it. And I want it to be right. But the worst part of this job isn't just those covers and rods and bits and bobs, because that will obviously allow you just to lift this up and away. But as you're probably guessing, the barrels go here, the head goes here, and they do unfortunately foul on this little thing, so you do have to remove them as well, which is why, sadly, you need to drop the engine out of the bike in order to do that stupid little job to remove that torsion spring if you need to replace it, or just get that actuator out for any other reason. I can't get a angle grinder in here at all. It's just not enough room. So I'm going to try an air saw firstly, slot it, and hopefully I can get a big screwdriver on there. This is technically on the outside of the engine, because the stator cover just kind of follows these mating surfaces here, not that bit, and so this is kind of open to the elements, although it's pretty well hidden, so it should be still quite oily and hopefully not stuck. Should do us. We might be slightly off centre, but I think we'll be alright. Oh Christ. Oh, I don't want to mull at that anymore. Okay. Some of this. Right. I chamfered the edge of the piece of steel on my grinder, so give it a good old whack. Hopefully that'll do it. Not absolutely sure. Oh dear. I need 3 hands because I need to hold the engine, hold the wrench and hold the blade, the flat bar I should say. And she came loose. Imagine it was probably just a bit of heat that helped that. I can't actually replace this because it's a special screw, so I'm going to need to refit it. It's a specific design, so can't just go whopping another bolt in there, but at least I've made it easy for the next person. Okay, so we've got the actuator up here. If I just unhook the spring, and where I took that bolt out there, can you see it's now free to move, but it does actually still foul on this middle gear, funnily enough. So that middle gear does have to come out as well. It's got to come out anyway for the cleaning process. Well, there's literally nothing else to fix on this engine now, so that does bring me to the end of this one. And next time, I'm just going to strip this side of the crankcases down fully because I need to get the output shaft out and the clutch actuator mechanism. Might even take the transmission bearings out and replace those. But I need to get into all the nooks and crannies on the cleaning process to make sure there's no more aluminium or steel floating around in there as I found on the strip down. And I need to also get onto the parts on the bench over there, give them a good thorough clean, ready for the final assembly, and then I can get it all put back together, back in the bike, and then we are done with this rat bike. I can get it MOT'd and then hopefully sold. Thank you very much for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and I will see you on the next video.